Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and it is time for Friday Reads. On Friday, of course, on Friday, because it's Friday Reads, okay, on March 8th, 2024. I know what year it is. I hope you all have been having a good week. I've had a good reading week. Let's talk about that and some other things. First of all, the news in the literary world this week is the release of the long list for the Women's Prize in Fiction. I've enjoyed several videos that sort of preview these books so far, and I think everyone who did predictions was a little surprised because there's so many debut authors on this list that escaped their radar, and I had no radar, so I am kind of surprised at some of the big names that aren't on there, like Tom Lake. But also I'm happy that it's a bunch of books I haven't read because I'll find some new ones that are good in here. I'm not trying to read through the list or follow any timeline. I'm just looking for some good books to add to my TBR. You know, because it's so short and I can't ever think of anything to read. But some of these do sound pretty good to me. Now, there's only two that I have in my possession. I'm halfway through one of them. I haven't read any of them, but I have, where'd it go? I'm in the middle of Interghost by Isabella Hammad right now, and I'm reading it for BookTube prize judging, so I can't comment on it, but it's also on the Women's Prize long list, so I am in the middle of that. And I do have Western Lane by Chetna Maru. I really wanted to read this last year when it made it to the Booker shortlist, and I just never got around to it, but I did buy a copy recently, and I still haven't read it yet, but I do want to read this fairly soon. It's just a short book. It just sounds really good every time somebody presents it again, so I'm interested to read that one. And then I looked up to see which ones were at my library. They have three of them. They have The Blue Beautiful World by Karen Lord. They have, which I think is science fiction. They have Ordinary Human Failings, which I think is Irish. Don't remember the author. And River East, River West, some kind of coming of age story. Again, I can't remember the author. So those three they have. So I don't have any particular immediate plans to read these, but they all did sound interesting and they are available, so I could get around to those. And then several of the other ones, I don't know exactly why my library didn't have the Anne Enright, because they have her previous books, so maybe they'll get that one in. And then another one that jumped out at me that's not available at the library was the one called 8 Lives of a Century-Old Trickster. That just sounded really interesting. I'll put the author's name up because I can't remember, but that one sounded like it was a interconnected stories about an elderly lady in a nursing home, a South Korean woman who's had all of these adventures, and I think that's what it's about. And it sounds like she's a shapeshifter and she's lived through all these different lives and experiences, so that was kind of intriguing. So that's it. A lot of the predictions, were kind of off the mark because there's so many new authors and debuts in here, but there's probably some really excellent books lurking in there, new authors to learn about. So that was kind of exciting. In TV viewing, we finished Criminal Record, the British police procedural. It was pretty good. The two main characters, the kind of cat and mouse tension there, the questions about what happened in the murder case from the past that the younger detective is investigating, and how much of a cover-up or how shady is the other guy. Like, it was pretty good. I can see the way they ended it, they could do a second season of it, and if they did, I would watch it. We're watching Schitt's Creek and Curb Your Enthusiasm kind of off and on, and the Schitt's Creek is a rewatch, and the Curb, we kind of got stranded somewhere in the 8th or 9th season, so we're trying to watch up to the end. And now it's kind of bittersweet because Richard Lewis is in it, and he passed away last week. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point, but I think it was last week. Oh, last couple of nights, we watched a documentary called The Greatest Night in Pop. I'll double check. And it was about the making of the song We Are the World. So let me just preface this by saying I do not like that song. It's a song from the 80s that was a charity song. It was a fundraiser song. It's still raising funds for famine in Africa. I have no problem about the cause or the purpose of the song, but the song itself is a cheesy 80s situation. But the story of how they got a zillion of the major pop stars of that time all together on the same night to record the thing is a pretty cool story. And a lot of the documentary, I think, is carried by the fact that Lionel Richie is a pretty good storyteller, and he remembers all these really specific details of when he wrote the song with Michael Jackson, and then the night that they actually made the song after the American Music Awards, which he was hosting, and then they all got together and stayed up all night and recorded the song. So the documentary was pretty good. We watched it. It's not long. It's under 2 hours, but we still broke it into 2 nights because we are, I mean, we're always kind of in, we invent our own short ass movies. We just take any movie and break it into 2 or 3 pieces because we don't want to sit and watch anything more than, like, you know, maybe a little over an hour at a time. So anyway, we did that, but I recommend it if you have any interest in that topic at all. You don't have to like the song, because I don't like the song, but the movie was pretty interesting, and it was fun to watch the 80s footage of everybody doing that session, because they did record a lot of footage because they made the music video also simultaneously that night. All right, let's move on into the week's reading. So the first thing that I finished was another book for the BookTube Prize Judging, August Blue by Deborah Levy. So I can't discuss the book right now, but I am going to film my vlog piece reviewing it right after I finish taping this conversation, and you'll see it eventually. But I did finish that, and then I moved on into something with a very different mood. All the books this week are just kind of all over the place on the moody coaster, and so the next one was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This was a reread. I read this back when I was probably about 14, and I don't know for sure if I read the entire series, but I know that I read more than one of them, but I didn't remember anything. I just remembered the fact that I had read them and liked them at that time. The reason why I was reading this right now is because it was the selection this month for the banned book club that I participate in at the public library. And I'm going to get to that in a minute because there's kind of a mystery about why this is a banned book. But this book, there was a real nostalgia factor in rereading this. And part of the nostalgia was reading it now, and it's a humorous science fiction book, but it's leaned heavily on the humor. The science fiction aspect is because the premise here is that right before the Earth is just blown up and demolished, an alien who's been posing as a human on Earth, who got stranded there for 15 years when he was only supposed to be there a week, rescues his friend, and his name is Ford Prefect. He rescues his friend Arthur Dent seconds before the Earth blows up, and they go on an intergalactic adventure. So, and the book, it's science fiction, but it's mainly humor. And at the beginning of the story, Arthur is staging a protest because his house is going to be demolished, and he's laying in the yard in front of the bulldozers. And there's this whole thing about how, well, you know, the notices were posted that this was going to happen, and there's all this satire on bureaucracy where the notice was posted, but it was posted in the bottom of a file cabinet in a sealed off bathroom down a dark staircase with no light bulbs, and, you know, like he never could have possibly seen or accessed this notification. So he's laying there. Little does he know that the Earth itself is also about to be demolished to make way for the intergalactic highway. So there's a whole other layer of insult about to come. And Ford is on Earth he's supposed to be researching and updating The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is kind of a precursor of a Kindle, because it's a little electronic book where you can look up anything in an encyclopedic fashion about people and places and things and events and history of the entire universe. But he got stuck, and he's been there way too long. So the nostalgia for me was reading it now and realizing how much funnier it would have been at that age. Like now it's amusing, but I can see where my 14-year-old self would have thought this was really funny. And also just that's the style of farcical humor of the 1978 when this came out, and the Monty Python vibes, because Douglas Adams did write for Monty Python before he wrote this book, and that is strong in the book. And he was still in his 20s when he wrote it. And so it's just it's goofy, it's lighthearted. It has lots of satire, but it doesn't have any meanness in it. It's just kind of fun. So that gets us to the issue of why was it a banned book? And I will not know that answer for sure till I go to the meeting, because one of the library employees that hosts the events, she's the one that looks up the history of the challenges or the banning. But my best guess is that very early on in the book, there's some jokes about religion and God and Jesus. And they're pretty light, and they don't dwell on it. But you know, if you put anything that somebody might object to, if you put it in the beginning of the book, I've noticed that if anything questionable is near the beginning, that is more likely to attract a challenge, because the person is not going to keep reading through the whole book. They read the first few pages, they see something they don't like, and they clutch their pearls and they run down to the school board or to the city council or whatever, and they complain. So that takes place, and the author was a known atheist. So they might have looked up the author. They might have seen these kind of jokes about creation and God that happen very early on. And it's not what the whole book's about, but there is a theme in the whole book about how Earth came to be there, how it was created, and for what purpose, and who's in charge, and all that. I guess could sit wrongly with someone who really has no sense of humor. I don't know. So that's all I can figure out. And I'll let you know if I find out something different. But there's no profanity. There's no sex scenes. I mean, the main things that usually get called up in challenges, none of those are there. So all I can get is the passing humor about creationism and religion and how all of it was wrong, and because really the meaning of life is something else altogether that is being deduced by a giant computer. But that was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. At the same time I was reading The Hitchhiker's Guide, I was reading another book that had such a different mood and flavor and tone, but I really enjoyed it as well. And that was the collection of short stories by Louise Kennedy, The End of the World is a Cul-de-sac. And this is the follow-up publication to Trespasses, which I really loved last year, that novel. And these are stories that I think some of them were previously published, and it looks like they have come out between 2017 up to the current time. So they don't go way, way, way back, but they go several years back. And they are not connected or interrelated stories. They are set all in Ireland. Most of them have women for the main character or narrator or protagonist. So a few of them focus on a main character, but for the most part, the women are front and center. There are two stories where the main characters appear to be sisters, and they're not even next to each other in the collection, but you get to a story where a person is calling her sister and thinking about her sister and her sister's partner, and it is someone who features in another story. But aside from that, they're not really connected. Something that surprised me in this collection was how rural it is. These are not city stories. These take place in small towns and countrysides, and there's sheep farmers and different kinds of farmers. It's kind of agrarian, and I don't know, I wasn't really expecting that. I guess Trespasses takes place in a smaller town, but I feel like it's near Dublin. I think there's a part where they go on the train and spend the weekend in Dublin. Am I right about this? Where do they go? Anyway, I'd have to look it up. But this one, and it's part of the storyline. Sometimes people feel kind of isolated, disconnected. There's a lot of frustrated and angry and disappointed women in these stories. There's a lot of angry, frustrated, and disappointing men in these stories. And there's just themes of dissatisfaction and lack of communication. It gets about halfway through before, for me, it started really cooking with some excellent stories. The first few stories, up through the first half, they were good. They were well written. I was enjoying them, but there was this just kind of like this repetitive theme and nothing that I really just was like, wow, that's just beautiful. And then all my favorite stories are in the second half. I think my number one favorite story in the collection is called Powder, and it is a story about a young woman an Irish woman who is on a tourist type trip of sites in Ireland with this older American woman. And we come to learn as the story unfolds that the older woman was the mother of the man that the younger woman was dating, and that the family believes that they were engaged, which there's a little communication glitch about that, which you'll find out as you read. But the mother wants to go and see these places that were important to her son, that he had been there working in Ireland, and then he had met the young woman. And so awkwardly, she has met his divorced parents on the occasion of his unexpected death. And then she goes on this trip with the mother, and the mother does have her son's ashes with her and wants to leave them in different places, hence the title Powder. And just the atmosphere of this story and how we gradually learn some details about why they are together, and how it's from the younger woman's perspective, how she feels about this trip, and her attempt to be patient but feeling suffocated and like she cannot wait for this event to be over, and having to spend all day with this perfectly nice woman who's just deeply, deeply grieving the loss of her son. And so that was my favorite one, but there were several others that I thought were really, really strong. I did enjoy it a lot, and I will include one of these when we get to September for Shorty September. I'll see if I can find one that is available online. When I finished with the short stories, I picked up my nonfiction book for the month, which is Poverty by America by Matthew Desmond. And you can see the proliferation of notes that is already occurring in this book. And Matthew Desmond is examining why America has such a persistent and pervasive problem with poverty, being the wealthiest nation in the world. What the heck is going on? Why does it continue? And why do so many of the efforts that are supposed to alleviate the problem seem to be inadequate, or they fail, or what is going on? So the chapters have names like why haven't we made more progress, how we undercut workers, the kind of problem poverty is. That's how far I've gotten so far. I'm in the part about how we undercut workers. And I think I'll wait till I get to the end and then share a couple of passages with you. But there's so many striking facts and figures, and also just the way that he presents the case. It's very readable. It's very compelling. It's pissing me off already, and I've got a long ways to go. Now, the book is not particularly long, though. There's a ton of notes and epilogue and back matter here. So it's just, I think the actual text is just under 200 pages. So it's not a daunting read, but it's pretty powerful so far. So I'll share a couple of excerpts from it when I get farther along or towards the end. But so far, this is a solid read, and I'm glad that I picked it up. And then last but not least, as I already mentioned, I'm in the middle of Interghost by Isabella Hammad. Can't talk about it because it's for the BookTube prize. It's also on the women's prize long list. So can't talk about it. What's coming up in the week ahead? I think I'm going to be starting a buddy read of this middle grade book, When You Reach Me, a Newbery winner. It doesn't have a medal. I guess they've had this copy since before it won the medal. by Rebecca Stead. Excellent book that I loved, and Michael Clark and I are going to reread this together. In a few days, I think we're starting. We'll have to check in and see if we're both ready. And so that's what's coming up. I don't know. After that, I have a lot of things on my card. I need to check my TBR. I might pick up If Beale Street Could Talk after one of these other books is finished. This one is one I've been eager to get to, so that might be coming up in the week ahead as well. So there you have it, the week in review. And let me know what you read this week that you really loved or you wish you had not bothered with. Any great shows that you've been watching or things that are coming up. I'm excited. Also, the week coming up, my daughter's going to be here for spring break, so that will be fun. Maybe I can talk her into making a cameo in my video next week. So have a great weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.